Welcome into the Big Little Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig. We are now done with the NBA season. The NBA Finals are over. The Oklahoma City Thunder are champions. Tyrese Halliburton went down in probably like the saddest way possible. And we got the NBA draft coming up, as well as a couple of different trades that have also happened since the season ended. No, the KD trade happened before NBA Finals Game 7. So we're going to get into that, plus the Anfernee Simons trade as well. But first, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to start with the NBA Finals. I didn't know if you had any specific direction for this Game 7 that you wanted to head into.
Yeah, so I wanted to maybe first congratulate the Oklahoma City Thunder. I feel like the way the news cycle works now is that we are so quick to move on to the next thing that even acknowledging the fact that a team just won the NBA Finals is almost swept under the rug for the KD trade and Anfernee Simons and looking ahead. But first of all, they put together a great roster. Obviously, Sam Presti and their whole general manager staff and everybody in that front office has done such a great job over the last couple of years, and now they've finally been rewarded with their first ever NBA title, at least as a part of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Which, I mean, shout out to their city and shout out to everything that they've built there. And it looks like they're going to be one of the teams to just be a force for the foreseeable future. They almost won 70 games, and they have a young core that should be intact for a while. But as part of the game, I think you the first part of your statement covered it pretty well. That as soon as Tyrese Halliburton went down, it felt like that game was Oklahoma City's to lose by a mile. That game was close until it wasn't. They blew it up in the third quarter. TJ McConnell tried holding them in the game, but it just wasn't going to be enough. And it probably shouldn't have been. If TJ McConnell is the second best player on your team, for an extended period of time, you're probably not going to win an NBA championship, unfortunately. But the Pacers did a great job of holding in that series, and the fact that we got a Game 7 for the first time in almost a decade was a really nice watch.
Yeah, it was. I was just happy to, kind of be there as a fan, just being able to watch Game 7. It was just so unfortunate that Tyrese Halliburton went down the way that he did. The team, the Pacers specifically, rallied. After he went down in that first half, they were up at the end of the half. And then that third quarter, it was only TJ McConnell. I forget how many points he had straight for that team. I think he had maybe 10 or 12 points straight. And then as the quarter went on, Caruso was able to check into the game. And then there was some more turnovers from TJ McConnell, and it just didn't seem like it was going to be enough. And then I was looking for Pascal Siakam in that game. He seemed to have been out. I don't know how he doesn't play 40 minutes in Game 7, but that's not what lost them the game. The Thunder went on ahead, won it. They didn't fold under any circumstances. Shea didn't have a great shooting night, but still they were able to put it together. He still had a good game, and then a more than deserving Finals MVP for him. So the Thunder were able to do what they do best, force turnovers, and then capitalize on the other end. And they were the best team this year. And more power to them. Maybe it would have been different with Tyrese Halliburton, but it's a battle of attrition. And every single year there's injuries, and the healthiest team will win the championship, and got to give it up.
Yeah, and I think that mentioning that even in Shea's bad games, it feels like he still steps up to the plate. I feel like Game 4 was one of those games where he wasn't having a great shooting performance, and in the fourth quarter, that just looking back, obviously in hindsight, or even in real time, going down 3-1 wasn't a thing that you wanted to do if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder. But being able to have your best player step up in the biggest moments and essentially win you that Game 4 by himself really ended up paying dividends for them in the long run, because I don't think that they would have been able to come back 3-1. And just throughout the course of the series, it might not have been Shea's greatest performance in the world, but throughout the course of the season, he's been one of the most consistent players that we've seen. He's averaged 30, and just for the last couple of years now, he's averaged 30 points for each of the last 3 seasons. And that he's a constant bucket getter, and he's even creating for his teammates more because of the fact that he's getting so much more attention. So I think that all props to him, and he's definitely one of, if not definitely bordering on the best player in the league.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that. Even when it seems like he's not shooting as well, he still kind of figures out how to have a good game. And I feel like he did that in every single game in the finals. And it was weird because, you didn't feel like you could really rely on Jalen Williams or Chet Holmgren. Usually maybe it's at least one or the other, but both of those guys were just a little bit too up and down. Chet Holmgren seems like he was pushed kind of to the side until this Game 7. And you really needed Shea to just kind of power through whatever slumps he ended up dealing with. And at the end of the day, he ended up with a great stat line for the entire finals. And this Thunder team, they shouldn't get any disrespect, or there shouldn't be any sort of delegitimizing their ring in a sense. I think that they're one of the best teams that we have seen over the last, 7 years now, since we've had, individual champions, no repeat champions. And I think of that group, they are among the best. I would include them maybe in the same conversation as the Celtics from last year. And then I got to think of some of the other teams that were really good over the last 7 years, like the Nuggets teams are good. Bucks, Lakers. Yeah, maybe the Lakers are last. I don't know if they're last, but the Raptors are up there too. I mean, but like I saw like Colin Cowherd ranked them or whatever. He had the Lakers
Maybe
first.
we should do a ranking one day.
I definitely think we should rank these teams. I think that would be a really good conversation. But I think that the Thunder team are at the top, and Shea
even over the Celtics last year.
Huh?
Even over last year's Celtics team.
You think so?
Yeah, I'm asking you that.
No, I don't think so. I think the Celtics team is the best team that we've seen since those Warriors teams. But I will say for Shea, and we've had a lot of legacy conversations. We got plenty of time to have them. It's really nice to get the monkey off your back in all facets. Get that MVP, get that finals MVP, and then get that championship. Now it's kind of playing with house money a little bit because we haven't really seen any of the other guys such as Jokic, Tatum, or Giannis really build off of not off of winning a championship, but it's not like they have 2 rings. Or Tatum is obviously missing the finals MVP. We do with that information what you will, as well as the MVP. But still, like the resume is kind of taking shape for Shea, and he's got a ton of time left.
Yeah, and you put yourself in those conversations, like with everything that you just said, you get the like you mentioned, like just all those accomplishments coming in one season. You kind of just like check a bunch of those boxes, and now you can have legitimate conversations. Where I feel like coming into the season, you knew Shea was a consistent 3-point per game scorer, but last season they were a little bit underwhelming in the playoffs. So you needed that last box to be checked off, and they did it this year, and it was a whole team effort. But again, like we were saying, like they have a great team from top to bottom, but Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is the reason. And he, like very deserving Finals MVP. It's the reason why they are NBA champions. So, as a whole, I think that the Oklahoma City Thunder are just a threat to watch out for the coming seasons. Obviously, we have like league moves that we're going to talk about and just shaking up of the like just the whole NBA. But I think that the West is definitely the conference to come out of at this point, especially with how the East is looking, and they look to be like the favorites going forward, at least for the foreseeable future.
I mean, before Halliburton went down, we were already counting the Eastern Conference teams that potentially weren't going to be as good next year as they were this year, and you add them to the list. I mean, this Eastern Conference is wide open next year, it feels like. So we'll see how the Pacers end up taking on next season. Maybe they tank, who knows? But let's get into the NBA draft. I know that you've got some prospects that you definitely wanted to highlight, some of the different guys that have caught your eye coming up on this draft. That's tomorrow. It's only a few days after the NBA Finals Game 7.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, first you want to go from the top of the list. So looking at Cooper Flag, going to the Dallas Mavericks. Obviously, a lot of people have been speculating the logistics behind that, behind the scenes. But just in general, I think that we want to give like a little bit of flowers to how that team is going to look like next year, especially like seeing what happens during the offseason. There is a possibility of Kyrie Irving not being there, but even still, like I mean, you basically have the Twin Towers if you have Anthony Davis and like a recreation of them at least with Anthony Davis and Cooper Flag at the helm in the front court there. And then if you can just center anything around those two players, it feels like they could be like, and maybe not championship contenders from the get-go, but still, like you give Cooper Flag a couple of years to develop, and if Anthony Davis can even stay remotely healthy, that is a team to watch looking forward. So I feel like just given Cooper Flag and the Dallas Mavericks their possible props is going to be something to see, because like you're going to be able to like officially say that he's a Dallas Maverick, even though we've known it for the last month. Or yeah.
Gotta love where the Mavericks are heading as far as getting Cooper Flag, and then you have a much better pitch to Kyrie Irving in the summer now, and I think he's more likely to come back in that sort of scenario, and they could potentially be a playoff team next year. So that's phenomenal for them.
Yeah, and if you just look at the whole state of Texas now, and it's like from top to bottom, it's stacked up. You have Wemby with the Spurs, and then you have Cooper Flag and Anthony Davis with the Mavericks, and now KD going to the Rockets. Like we'll cover that in a second too. But man, like three of the best teams in the league, like obviously in the Western Conference for sure, and in the whole league are going to come out of Texas, and it's going to just be like a battle. I feel like those teams play each other multiple times a year. I can't wait for those matchups.
All right, so who else are you looking at for this draft?
Yeah, so you go through like 1 through 3, and I feel like it's pretty solidified. Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, they both went to Rutgers out of high school, and they were two of the biggest prospects behind Cooper Flag. And you just look at them, and Rutgers didn't have the greatest season. They didn't have the greatest team surrounding them, and they were like two of the best players but they didn't have the greatest season individually. You didn't see them much, but I'm really hopeful for their NBA prospects or NBA talent because of the fact that coming out of high school, they were two of the biggest names. And if Cooper Flag wasn't a part of, if he wasn't such a generational talent, you'd look at Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey as two of the best prospects we've seen in a while. You slide down a little bit during that list. VJ Edgecombe, who Duke and Cooper Flag played in their run during the NCAA tournament, he was the best player on that Baylor team and immediately inserted himself on a team that had Norchad O'Meara and just other teammates on that team that could have been like considered better players, at least to start. VJ Edgecombe came into that team and was just immediately good. So wherever he goes, he could be 4 or 5 in that slot. I really like him. Sliding down just a little bit more, Con Knipple, he was one of the stories of the like just Duke's team in general this year. But then also when you look, he raised his draft stock a lot during the March Madness tournament. He's just a sharpshooter. He has a handle. He can get outlet passes to people. I think that he fits the more traditional guard role of what like NBA teams like to see at this point. So him going like in that very, very high, like just outside of that first top 5 picks, but like somewhere in like that 6 to 10 range, I feel like you get yourself a very solid role player at the worst there. And then sliding down a little bit more, like as one of like maybe the draft steals, I want to highlight Asa Newell, who is one of the best players or the best player on that Georgia team this year, who made it back to the NCAA tournament for the first time in a while. He was a freshman. He was 6'9" freshman, and he was just he was or 6'11" freshman, I want to say. He averaged over 15 points a game and 7 rebounds. He was just like a dominant force for the Bulldogs. Obviously, they didn't have a great tournament, but if you watched them in the SEC this year, he was like a person to look out for. And from the jump, he scored 26 points in his first game, kind of inserted himself, even though he was a young guy. And one of the one and dones that I really like, it probably goes anywhere from 15 to 20, maybe even a little bit later than that. But if you're looking for a steal in the draft and you have like a lower lottery pick to like just pick in the high teens to early 20s, Asa Newell is like one of those guys where he's 6'11", can work on his jump shot a little bit, but like is one of those bigger guys that you could see his game translating to NBA.
A couple other names that I definitely wanted to add also is Jace Richardson and Walter Clayton Jr. I know a lot of people have been talking about Walter Clayton Jr. for his performance in the March Madness tournament and obviously being the leader of that Florida team. I know that he kind of rose and got into the first round based off of it, but it's pretty interesting because I've seen him mocked as high as like when the Magic had their original pick at number 16 before they ended up trading into the Grizzlies. And then I'm seeing him to potentially the Miami Heat. And then Jace Richardson right around that mid-lottery area as well, also to the Memphis Grizzlies and to some of those other teams. Jace Richardson was really talented for Michigan State, kind of came on at the very end of the year. And both of those guys, maybe like smaller players and have their own physical limitations, but definitely could be really good players off the bench in their first year and be a future point guard for whichever team drafts them. I like them both. I think they're really good. And then obviously just from the Magic's perspective, because I always try to bring that in a little bit. I know that they're looking at both of those guys too. So maybe they won't be available all the way down to number 25, but definitely in that 16 to 25 range. I think both those guys are really, really good picks if you can get them.
Yeah, I don't want to disrespect Jace Richardson at all, but he almost reminds me of like Cassius Winston. Or was that his name that played with the one with the headband that played at Michigan State for like years on end? He ended up going like late in the second round, but like I feel like they had similar guard profiles. I'm not as high on Jace Richardson as like some of like other like people are mocking him a little bit higher into like that early or not early but later lottery picks into like the higher teens, early 20s. I just don't know that his smaller guard frame like specifically translates to NBA. I could be completely wrong, and he could like his game could completely translate, and he's a good defender. But I feel like I just don't like. I'm not as high on Jace Richardson as some of the other people, and I personally like as like a Heat fan, I could be looking for a guard or somebody just like we could be in the market for a guard. I don't personally like the Jace Richardson fit, at least not for my system. But and then you look at Walter Clayton Jr. and I'm not looking at it as like clearly through like I'm looking at it more clearly, like not through like rose-colored glasses. I feel like because of the national championship, you take a step back. There was a reason why he was like mocked like earlier on in like the set or like like even mid to late second round at first, and like his draft stock just rose so high. Obviously, he's a clutch time player, but how consistently is he going to be able to do that or even get those opportunities in the NBA? Not that significantly. At the very best, he's going to be a role player going into this next season. So I would like to see his development, but he's still like not a fully developed player, and I want to see where where he ends up going. But I'm maybe not as high on either of those players, but I think that like there's definitely like room for growth for both of them, and they could both end up being they were for guard as of guards plays in especially in the tournament and even before that, like going into like March. Jace Richardson and Walter Clayton Jr. were two of the best guards in the country, so I want to give them their flowers. I just like there are some guards you feel like don't translate as well to the NBA, and those two names kind of like stick it. Like I wanted to mention those two names as two guys where they've been mocked a little bit higher than I personally like. I like to see them. So
that's completely fair. Let's move into the Kevin Durant trade. The Phoenix Suns traded Kevin Durant to the Houston Rockets for Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, the number 10 pick in this current draft, as well as 5 second-round picks. From the Rockets' perspective, do you like this?
I do like this from the Rockets' perspective. They're in a win now mode at this point. They not this past year, but the year before, they just missed out on the NBA playoffs. And then this past year, they were the number 2 seed. Obviously, they got eliminated, but that 7 seed Warriors and just the Western Conference in general was going to be tough. Anywhere from the 2 to like the 4-2-7 to the 4-5 matchup. Felt like there were tough matchups all around. Obviously, the Lakers got upset, and then obviously the Rockets did as well. So the fact that they're trying to win now and they see that the Western Conference is deep, I think that like you want Jalen Green was a really good regular season player and one of the best players on that team. I think Alperen Sengun kind of stepped up as their best player throughout the course of the season. But don't get me wrong, Jalen Green is a really good player. But do you, as for right now, do you want Jalen Green or Kevin Durant, especially in the clutch moments, especially in the playoffs? You want Kevin Durant, and that's how I think they're looking at it. They have a coach, Ime Udoka, who has won before, maybe not the highest level, but is a winning coach, and they're in the market to win now. They see the Oklahoma City. They see some of the other teams. They see a developing Minnesota or a Minnesota, at least with Anthony Edwards. And you see some of the other teams in the Western Conference. You need a move, and this is their move for them. And I think that it puts them in a better place, and you don't lose that much. Like Dillon Brooks is a player that you a really great 3-and-D guy, somebody you really like, but it's not the biggest loss in the world. Jalen Green is obviously a step down from Kevin Durant, and the picks you can do without him. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, the number 10 pick is interesting because I didn't know if they had to include Jalen Green and the number 10 pick, but it seems like a fair price for Kevin Durant. He was so good still for the Suns last year. He could play with any team and anybody in the NBA and make it work. He's such a versatile player, and they were bad, not because of Kevin Durant last year. Like he was still so good, so efficient, and like you said, in the clutch moments, Kevin Durant being on this Rockets team definitely – it feels like they've elevated beyond what they were last year. Unfortunately for Jalen Green, it just seems like that playoff series was like the nail in the coffin for him. They realized, I think, that they didn't really want to build around him being their second best player. And with that, plus maybe some other concerns just simply about maybe efficiency or where exactly he was headed as far as the ceiling was concerned, it makes sense that they might want to deal him. From the Suns' perspective, I was kind of surprised that they now have Jalen Green, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. They're obviously going to try to build around Bradley Beal, and they're kind of collecting – or excuse me, around Devin Booker. They want to get off of Bradley Beal as soon as possible, but they are kind of collecting assets. So I think it's really interesting from their perspective as well, what they want to end up doing with Jalen Green. I thought I saw an initial report that they wanted to end up moving Jalen Green after this trade. I don't know exactly if they can do that immediately or what exactly the timeline for that is as far as they're concerned. But I like what they got in return because Kevin Durant was not going to stay there. And I think it works for both sides.
Yeah, no, I think that it almost works a little bit worse for the Suns just because of the fact that you have 3 players that play a very similar style. If you end up moving forward with this current construction because you're not getting off of Bradley Beal's contract. Jalen Green is movable, but like how quickly can you do that is a question you just raised, and I don't know the answer to it. And then Devin Booker is also that shooting guard type of like they all need the ball in their hands to like perform, and I think that's kind of the issue that they ran into last year. Devin Booker and Bradley Beal like just play too similar of a style of basketball. I feel like it just doesn't really work. So I don't think that Kevin Durant was really the issue with that because if anything, he's the least ball dominant of the 3. So and just if you're looking at the Rockets moving forward, like like in a team where you have two other, obviously Bradley Beal was injured for periods of time. They don't always touch the floor together, but even on a team where you have two other great players, he averaged 26 points a game. He's averaged at least 25 points a game since his sophomore season in the NBA. So what is that, like 12, 13 years now? Like we all know who Kevin Durant is. Kevin Durant is that guy. And if you want to take the next step forward and not have to lose too much in return, I feel like this is one of those deals where you look at it from a Rockets perspective and you just got a lot better and you want to see where you can go moving forward.
I mean, I think the Rockets certainly love their position. I think it's really good for the Rockets. I'm more optimistic now for the Suns just because Kevin Durant didn't want to be there, and you were able to get off of him, and now Bradley Beal's probably going to pick up his player option after this upcoming season. So you're going to deal with at least 2 more years of trying to either get him to a terrible team and you essentially pay for trading him away, or this is your roster and this is how you construct it. And Jalen Green, while he does play the same position and a less efficient style of basketball, now you have him and you could potentially move him after this next year. It was never going to be a win now move for the Suns. So at least they have some sort of capital to work with and not a player that's actively seeking a trade, making it a little bit tougher on them to move a guy like Kevin Durant or like, with Jalen Green not wanting out completely. So I think it's interesting from their perspective. I think there's light at the end of the tunnel now for the Suns, and I think that's what's positive.
Yeah, no, I mean I agree from that perspective as well, just because of the fact that like you just were never, yeah, like the Suns like were in win now mode when they got Bradley Beal, when they got Kevin Durant, but like this experiment has like it just been like pretty much like what you'd consider a failure is like one of the bigger moves, and like looking at 3 superstars and like possibly being able to like do well in a conference they didn't even like get close to making the playoffs this season. So I think that like moving forward, you possibly have like also Jalen Green, like obviously like left a bad taste in people's mouths with the way he played in the playoffs. But like throughout the course of the regular season, he was like one like of the best players, like maybe not in the NBA, but like he was the second best player on the second best team in the Western Conference, and a conference that we were saying for the majority of the season was the conference to like be in, the conference to be. So I like I don't want to get too low on Jalen Green, because if he picks up things from Devin Booker, like that duo could be scary for years to come. And even if not, like he's a good young player, and if he keeps on developing, you could like move him maybe a little bit later on for even more. So I don't know exactly what the Suns' thought process is like at this current moment, what they want to do with him. But like Jalen Green isn't a bad basketball player. He averaged almost 20 points a game this season, if not 20 points a game. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but I want to say like they didn't. It's not like they got a scrub back. Jalen Green is a good player, and then they also got the number 10 pick in this year's draft. So if they can hit on that, well, the second rounders, like nobody really ever cares about them. But still, like you got some capital, you got a good player in Jalen Green, and the Kevin Durant experiment was a short one, but one that probably wasn't going to work out.
What was so amazing about this whole scenario is that I also feel like Devin Booker can play with a lot of players and a lot of teams in this league, and it just simply didn't work. So maybe there's something there with him, pairing him with Jalen Green. So you're right. It's a capital move. So they're in a better spot than they potentially were a handful of days ago. Okay, the Boston Celtics traded Drew Holiday to the Portland Trailblazers for Anfernee Simons and 2 second-round picks. Somebody stop Brad Stevens. From this point of view, what are the Blazers doing? What was kind of the thought process here for them? Before we get into, I think this is a net positive for the Celtics pretty much.
Yeah, at face value, it definitely looks like it, and I don't know what the exact contract situation is for Anfernee Simons. I think I looked it up very briefly, and he got signed in 21, 22, so his contract should be expiring like pretty soon, if not his player option coming up very, very soon. So I don't know exactly what like the deal was on that, but at face value, if you don't look at the contracts and you just look at this trade for what it is, it's very confusing from the Blazers' perspective, because they've been a team since Damian Lillard's left where they've just been at the bottom of the Western Conference, and you think that they're just trying to get younger and like maybe make a push for like mid or like not even, we're in the mid 2020s, like late 2020s, early 2030s at this point, and just looking forward like that is essentially the goal of this Portland Trailblazers franchise. And then you make a move like this where you have like maybe not like a budding star, but Anfernee Simons can put the ball in the basket. He's not the greatest defender, but he is like one of their best offensive players and one of the younger players they have on this team. And they had him for only $25 million a year at this point. And I don't know that he was going to get a huge payday outside of that because of the fact that he's like thriving in a lower market, and I just don't know that a huge payday was coming up for him. So if you get like a possibility of keeping a young guy on your team for maybe not like a crazy amount of money, I don't see why you move off of him, especially for a Drew Holiday where you'd assume he either gets bought out or maybe plays with them. But like, what is the like Drew Holiday at this point in his career is like needs to play for a contender because he's not looking to stay with a team for a couple years and help build a roster. Like Drew Holiday is getting older and he is like he's a solid like offensive player. What he's known for is his defense, but like what does that do for you in Portland? It just doesn't make any sense for the Trailblazers, at least to me.
Yeah, I think they would have liked to get something more like close to the future, like not do something similar to what the Suns were able to do, but just a little bit more flexibility and capital to work with. Keep saying capital today, but still like a little bit more to work with. I'm glad that you brought up the Simons contract. He's after this year, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent, so he doesn't have any option right now. And for Drew Holiday, he's got 3 more years left on his deal, and I believe that is including a player option. So I'd imagine getting paid at that point like 37 million in that player option year. Like he's going to try to pick that up. And for the Blazers, in a handful of years, you want to hopefully be competing. That's not going to be a contract that they like on their team. And I think that just doesn't really make a ton of sense. Now, they might have some more moves kind of to be made. And Drew Holiday is still a decent player that I could see in a rotation for a playoff team. So maybe there's a market for him in a couple years or in a year, or in a year or something like that. But right now, this upcoming year for the Blazers, it didn't really make much sense. And then especially when you look at like a team like the Magic, we're very interested in Simons and what they ended up giving up for Desmond Bane. So like, I don't know what the conversations were like during the trade deadline between those two, but it was definitely rumored that the Magic wanted Simons. So I don't know exactly why they ended up doing this deal with the Celtics, but they've been trying to potentially trade Simons for it feels like 2 years now. So they just kind of got him off the squad and they're just going to invest in their already young point guards and shooting guards and stuff like that. I didn't know if you had another point on the Blazers. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to like think like what was I guess that they were like trying to get rid of Anfernee Simons for a while now, but like also what is the market for Drew Holiday that like the Boston Celtics like couldn't have realized? You know what I mean? Like what like possible gain do you get from this that like I feel like if you could possibly get like a couple first rounders from a different team or whatever that like championship contender that might want Drew Holiday would give up, like why would the Boston Celtics just not take that trade instead of trading for Anfernee Simons that will be an unrestricted free agent in a year that you're not really like planning on contending without Jason Tatum? So I just don't see like what the Blazers are seeing that the Celtics might not have.
That's interesting that you bring that up. I think the Celtics like the fact that he's an unrestricted free agent right now because I think at the very least, no matter what happens, I think they are going to be a lot more competitive this upcoming year. I think maybe from afar, they like Anfernee Simons and they say, all right, we can put him with Jaylen Brown. Maybe we kind of keep this team intact and we see how far we can get. Obviously, they're not on the level as they were before, but I mean, we just opened this with there are like 3, there are a couple Eastern Conference teams, not 3 anymore, I guess it would be 2, that are going to be out of this from where they were last year. So why not try to make, some more aggressive moves? I don't know what they're going to end up doing with KP, but they look at that from, a perspective of staying competitive this upcoming year and not just throwing it away. Maybe they really like Anfernee Simons' game. They think he can take a next step. And, if it doesn't work out, he's gone. They get him off the books. And then their cap situation is a lot better next year as opposed to what it would have been if they had just kept Drew Holiday even further on. So I think that they like the fact that it is where it is right now, and it's kind of a 1-year rental. There's a low risk in a sense, and then maybe you make a run. Maybe he elevates his game, and then maybe you end up paying him at the end of that amazing playoff run that he potentially could have. I mean, obviously thinking really optimistically, but that's potentially, I think, where their head's at. I just don't know for the Blazers' perspective. I think some of these moves I think that we see is just teams just trying to move to the next step. I mean, Simons has been in these talks for so long, but the Drew Holiday contract really bogs this team down. I mean, They don't really have a ton of guys like on the books, I feel like, on major deals, like outside of Simons. It would have been, I'm trying to think, like Ayton's getting paid, but like, they I don't know how close they are, what their entire cap situation is looking like, but it doesn't kill them, but like it really hurts them in a couple of years, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and like from a Celtics perspective, like you don't really see any losses in this because if Anfernee Simons doesn't play well, then you lose him off like the contract off your books, like the Drew Holiday contract completely off your books, and then also like if he plays really well, like you mentioned it, there's only like what it would be the Knicks and the Cavaliers that look like the best teams in the NBA or at the Eastern Conference at this point because of the fact that the Celtics are like I guess you count them in if you're talking about them, but like they've lost a couple. They've lost Jason Tatum, and then also you look at Tyrese Halliburton, it goes down for the Pacers now. So two out of the four Eastern Conference final or not final semifinalist teams are now down their superstar to ACL injuries. So. You're looking from outside perspectives. You look at the Magic now are a much better team, and the Pistons probably also bringing up the rear. But that conference, like in a conference where you're talking about like possibly being wide open, I feel like the Eastern Conference looks exactly like that right now.
And I know that you meant the Achilles, but I also just wanted to
Yeah.
mention too, like this Celtics team now goes into this next season with potentially like the best 4-man guard rotation in the NBA. I mean, my goodness, you've got the reigning 6 man of the year, Anfernee Simons, Derek White, and Jaylen Brown. I mean, I think that's an amazing kind of 4-guard rotation there that you have for your team. So you put yourself in a pretty good position if they could just figure out what's going on in the front court and then whatever's going on with KP. I mean, they're right back almost in a very similar spot to where they are last year. I don't see this team being an easy out in the first round at the very least.
Agreed.
Yeah. All right. Well, it looks like we covered everything today. This has been the Big Little Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That's Andrew Greig. We'll be back with more content very soon.